Hey there, and welcome to another nerdy review. I'm the Absolute Nerd, and today we'll be reviewing Turn A Gundam. Now, before I begin with anything, let me just give you this quick spiel here. If you're watching this on Twitch, make sure to follow me on my Twitch account here. If you are watching this on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about Turn A Gundam? My opinion on it? Have you seen it before or have you not? I want to hear from you guys. That said, let's just jump into the story here. So, Turn A Gundam takes place in the correct century of 2345. We follow our main character here, Laurent Sahak, who is a moon returnee himself, and he joins up with the militia in order to fend off the invading forces of the moon race, who have returned to reclaim the Earth. That's pretty much the story for the most part. It does change and evolve later on, but majority of the series is pretty self-contained to that story alone. Now, Turn A Gundam is a 50-episode series released back in 1999 as part of Bandai and Sunrise's Gundam Big Bang 20th Anniversary project. Do you have to say it's a pretty good Big Bang project, because definitely is a good release after they release G-Savior. So, what makes this series a pretty big deal is several things, but I just want to bring out some fun little factors for you guys here. This does mark, after a long 5-year hiatus, the return of Yoshiyuki Tomino to write and direct a Gundam series in the Gundam franchise. The last time that he actually did something was, again, 5 years prior, when he last wrote and directed Victory Gundam back in 1994. Now, I had mentioned this in my Reconquista and G review, and I forgot to mention a specific person too. But this also marks the first time that Tomino works with Studio Ghibli animator Kenichi Yoshida and then mechanical designer Akira Yasuda. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his last name as well. Both Kenichi and Akira do work again with Tomino 15 years later to work on Reconquista and G. The only difference that in this case here, Kenichi did work on the animation, which is very familiar. If you're familiar with a lot of Studio Ghibli works, he's got a lot of familiar stuff here. But he's primarily just the animator of this entire series, and then when he comes back to work with Tomino in Reconquista and G, you see a lot more Studio Ghibli influences with the character designs in Reconquista and G. Now, the music in Turn A Gundam is composed none other than by Yoko Kanno. Some of you might be familiar with her name if you watch a lot of anime. She's done a lot of big anime compositions, such as for Cowboy Bebop, Ghost in a Shell Standalone Complex, Wolf's Rain, and Cardcaptor Sakura, just to name a few. A lot of the music that Yoko Kanno composes for Turn A Gundam really set a lot of the atmosphere perfectly, from happy and jovial moments to very sad, even haunting moments too, especially with the second ending theme song, which is Moon. That song is incredibly powerful and moving. From the melodic tones throughout the entire song to the actual lyrics itself. This song primarily, not only is it featured as the second ending theme, but is used in very pivotal moments in the entire series. It gets some moments in the series where it kind of gets very teary for me and very, very moving. But I do want to say that I'll leave a link down below for you guys to give a listen to the song Moon. Again, really powerful stuff from Yoko Kanno. It's got a lot, again, that haunting, sad tones to it, but a little bit of that soldier's pace, that soldier's march. Reminds me of some music from Ghost in a Shell, primarily the Standalone Complex series. And then, again, fits very well with a lot of the moments, that pivotal moments in Turn A Gundam, alongside with the ending theme. Now, Turn A Gundam is very famous, or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it, for having a very different approach and different take on the entire Gundam franchise. Speaking about being famous too, very little is known about this as well. You could kind of see with the animation itself, But sadly, and I do want to say this too, Turn A Gundam is the last Gundam series in the entire Gundam franchise right now that was hand drawn on cell. The future series going forward, starting in 2002 with Gundam Seed, started doing digital animation, so much of it was no longer done by hand or on cell. So Turn A lot of its animation, the aesthetics, the looks of it, the appeal for it, really is captured by that hand artwork. Not saying that the digital animation doesn't look clean or good either, but it really does show when you're watching this entire series. I do apologize for not having any other image beyond this one right here to really capture the animation or the look of the animation itself. I mean, the other thing I got for you here is the cover work too for the Blu-ray. You know, like right here, what we got here, and I can show you just a smidgen bit more with the second volume here. I do want to say with artwork too, I really am enamored with the DVD covers. It's funny because when you look at here, let me just show you a couple of them, right? Like, got that, we got the meeting here, we got after one of the battles, and then the moon itself. A lot of these were the DVD covers themselves, but they are also featured on the Blu-rays themselves too. When I saw these on the covers of the Blu-rays, I'm like, oh wow, I really love, I think, let me get to our Lily Borgiano one. These two right here are probably my favorite, just because of the texturing behind it, and then the, you can see a little bit of that texturing, like it's that pastel-y kind of texture. I'm no artist, okay, and or a huge fan of art necessarily, but there's some things I can appreciate. Kind of reminds me of like Van Gogh's Starry Sky almost, with the texture of the sky. And you can kind of see that with Gingham right here, and a lot of the overall aesthetic and look of it. So I just want to point out, I really love the artwork. That was not part of the series necessarily, but outside for the product itself. Let's jump over here. Actually, I'm going to leave it on some of our artwork here. I really love this artwork. So going back to the whole point about how Turn A Gundam is very different than most Gundam series, let me set it up for you in this way. Most Gundam series take place in the future or some future-esque setting. Turn A Gundam does not start off in this manner at all. In fact, the very first episode, with the exception of seeing a flat landing with Lauron, Fran, and Keith, you wouldn't have been able to tell that this was a Gundam series at all. In fact, you would think this is a period piece, because the entire setting of Turn A Gundam takes place in like a 19th century setting, where you see more like planes, kind of like industrial, like mid-industrial revolution era stuff. You can see like a lot of the nobility or the looks of nobles and such of that. It's just more of an older world is the best way to put it. And that is so strange. You get it from the aesthetics of the world around you to, of course, our characters, because most of our characters are Earthers who are from, like, you know, like from that time frame. We do get characters, of course, from the Moon Race, where they have more of that futuristic / stylish look that's very alien compared to what we have for our Earther cast. But very much of this series is grounded in that setting, that appeal. The music complements it very well, and it makes you question, like, if you just took out the mobile suits and stuff like that, are we really, and a lot of the sci-fi elements, are we really watching a Gundam series? It's very different, but oddly enough, it still has a lot of core elements and themes presented throughout the entire Gundam franchise, and it hits so home with Turn A. The other thing about it is that Tomino, as what we've seen with previous works, if you watch any of the other reviews or watch any of the actual series themselves, Tomino tends to have a really good ability to write a lot of great characters in a war setting. Turn A Gundam is really more focused not so much so as the war itself, even though there is kind of like even like a small, I would say like it feels like a small war almost, like a war in a pocket. But it's a very human story. More human than majority of the other Gundam series that we've watched thus far. We focus so much more on our characters. A lot of them are very dynamic, very metamorphosized type characters. It fits very well with the themes of like cocoons and butterflies within Turn A Gundam. Those are subtle themes, by the way, but they are very ever so prevalent throughout it. Just like how Tomino writes for our characters in war stories, he writes every single character with absolute precision and uniqueness. I enjoy a lot of the characters in the series. There's a few characters I don't like, but even if I didn't like them as much, like for example, I don't like Soche, I don't like Guin as much, and I didn't like Lily Borgiano for good portions of the series too. But even when I didn't like them as much, I still enjoyed them as characters, and I liked them because no one truly stays the same as a character. I think the only person who might still stay the same might be Laurent, but that's not saying a whole lot too. Everybody in this series seems to be pretty dynamic about who they are or what they represent. And Tommy really gives it his best when presenting a lot of these characters. The best way I could describe the entire series, because we are so focused on these characters, is that we are more focused on the interactions of our characters together. And they're kind of waltzing around with a lot of the elements and core themes to the Gundam franchise alongside with the mobile suits. It's an interesting waltz, a serenade almost of characters and story with sci-fi. I was gonna say just mecha, but just sci-fi in general too. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. There are two other characters I want to talk about too, like just briefly. They're by the name of Bruno and Jacob. There are other characters like those guys I start off not liking at all, but then they grow on me. They are like double versions of Kai Shiden from the original Mobile Suit Gundam. I don't think I best depicts it. Here we go. We got Diana and Keel. I think it's Keel. Dynamics with them, those two as well, was really, really nice. They might seem like the same characters, and it almost seems like they're the same character from beginning to end, but just like their appearances, everything still looks the same, but they are completely different by the end of the series. Just like a bunch of the characters too. It's wonderful to see how these characters again interact with each other and then go about with what's going on in the events of this entire series. Very dynamic, such an enjoyable cast of characters. Even the ones I don't like, they're enjoyable. That being said, with the characters, the series is also hyper-focused on the politics. So, I mean, there's the politics between, like, you know, the Earthers versus the Moon race, but there's also the politics within each faction themselves, too. It grows and diverges in multiple different paths and ways. And, again, it waltzes, it serenades so well with our characters and how they are fluid about who they are or where they are standing or who they are with. Very, very interesting. Very nice. I want to talk about this too. I'm jumping a little bit ahead too as I talk about politics when it comes to Gundam Wing and Turn A Gundam. So I just want to bring this up just very briefly because a lot of people tend to say that Gundam Wing tends to be too preachy and very, very politicized. Turn A Gundam is the exact same equivalence to that, but of a different side of the coin. And that's it's kind of perfect with here how we have both Diana and Keel being the dynamics or the duality. They are the exact same thing, the same mirror image, but they represent two different things. And just to briefly go on this, Gundam Wing tends to have a lot of that political aspect, but much of it is very theatrical, very operatic. All this bravado and these orchestrated movements, right? It's very enjoyable, and that's what makes Gundam Wing enjoyable from that standpoint, besides the action, but it grandstands a lot with a lot of the theatrics of its politics. Turn A Gundam, though, of the exact same coin, but of a different face. Turn A Gundam focuses really heavily on the politics, but the action is not completely there, and it's not of such grand operatic or theatrical actions. It's, again, I revert back to, it's very human, very natural in its ways, very organic about how it is with the politics in its series. One character might be performing a certain type of an action, but it wouldn't come off as such a grandstanding, because when they transition over to another side for whatever the reason, it's not of this like, I'm doing this and like it's so grandiose. No, it's almost ever so subtle, but it has such a major or big ripple and impact at that time frame, or even throughout the entire series. So I would like akin again. These are just like Diana and Kai-Hel. These are almost like two of the same coin. Very politicized series, but of two different faces. Super theatrical, super operatic-esque, more subtle, very human. That's the best way I can put it for both of these series. Really enjoy the political interactions amongst our cast. I can't say just specifically the characters, but our cast overall, because it doesn't just impact one or few characters. Everybody's involved. And again, going back to like the hyper focus of characters, Tomino does a fantastic job of dividing and conquering, giving everybody the appropriate screen time, allowing you as the viewer to get really familiar with these characters, getting inside their heads and thinking why they're doing what they're doing, and thinking what their next step is. It's very fascinating and interesting to watch. Now, with Turn A Gundam's hyper focus on our characters and the political story, we do have some things that suffer throughout the entire series, and that primarily is with the pacing and then the action. Let me start off with the pacing. The pacing of the entire series is almost like a snail's crawl. Because of the lack of action, and we're really mostly focusing on our characters, so there's a lot of dialogue between our characters, a lot of screen time with our characters. Tomino gets us to be very, again, familiar with them, getting to understand who they are, how they think, and what they're about to do. It doesn't become too much of a question, but it becomes more like an exciting scene of what's going to happen next, or what's going to unveil with these characters. Even though you can kind of predict it, but not entirely. And alongside with that political intrigue, too, with all that being said, there wasn't a whole lot of room to shove in a lot of the action. Much of the action, too, is pretty lackluster. We do get fights throughout the episodes, sometimes more and sometimes less. It's a very infrequent number. And very similar to Victory Gundam, where a lot of the action, a lot of the fights are trying to be more like disabling each other. Not trying to result in actually killing each other. There are some deaths that do occur on screen, but it's not to the same level that we would expect to see like in prior Gundam series, like the original Gundam or Zeta or even ZZ Gundam. But what we get here is that it's focusing just like on Victory Gundam, the disablement, either shooting off parts or cutting off parts, or even just fist fighting for the most part too. So with that said, like, a lot of the action just doesn't feel too exciting or interesting, because we know our characters are not necessarily, well, some of them are trying to kill each other, but for the most part, like Laurent, for an example, isn't really fighting to kill, more or less just fighting to stop the fighting. Makes sense with Laurent's character. because of this, again, the slower pace really drowns out a lot of excitement for the series. So this is one of those kind of series where you got to be very patient with it, and the reward is the outcomes of all this build up, all this tension from the political intrigue that is in Turn A Gundam. I was gonna say G Gundam, but yeah, pretty much because of all of our focus here on our characters and the political story, the action is subpar, and very much so the pacing of the series feels like a snail's crawl. But it does pay off once we get to the important or critical portions of these political dialogues or the results of certain political actions. Though, even though it's a slower pace, it's very thorough though. Like, majority of the entire series is consistent with its pace. From, I would almost say almost to the end, because the last few episodes kind of feel rushed, and I would almost say it's like akin to almost like Rico G, where a lot of the actions with the characters feel a little contrived. I mean, it does fit with what the character would have done, but they get to point A to point B so fast that is very different than the consistency that you had seen throughout the entire series. So it just felt a little bit rushed or so, and I felt like this series might have done better if it wasn't a 50 episode series. It would have done better if it was a 60 episode series. Like, Tomino needed just had extra 10 more episodes to really tell the last few episodes of of Turn A Gundam. Just so the characters' actions don't feel too contrived. Definitely wasn't a convoluted plot at that point, but a lot of character actions and motivations felt a lot contrived. And if Tomino just had more time to fit that time span, I think it would smooth out a lot of the wrinkles, is what I would put. Just smoothing out the wrinkles of the last few episodes. Other than that, super consistent with the pace, though. Even though at a snail's crawl, it's still consistently good, though. Now, regarding the final episode, and again, not spoiling anything, I think that the final episode does a fantastic job of what I would say is a phenomenal closure to the entire Gundam franchise. Turn A Gundam is known for being the last Gundam series of all Gundam series in the Gundam franchise. You can watch anything up until this point, but Turn A Gundam would be the final one that you watch. Your exit from the Gundam franchise itself. And boy, that ending is incredibly powerful, moving, even sad. And not to spoil too much again, but again, Yoko Kanno's Moon is played for almost its entire duration of the song, and the remaining portions of that episode, it's about like almost like a 4 to 5 minute song, and we get a montage. And if you've been paying attention to the entire series, the ending is not a question of what has happened or what's going on. It does leave some questions of what could happen, but again, Tomino wraps everything nicely up, like a little package, like a goodbye package for you for watching the Gundam franchise. And it encapsulates a lot of, again, those core elements of the Gundam franchise, the core themes of the franchise itself. Themes such as, like, the horrors of war, no matter who wins, the innocent loss. But we also get newer themes, too, such as the whole cocoon or butterfly themes that we get with Diana and Kaihel, story, the sides for Laurent, and many, many other characters. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but I think the ending, it's the happiest ending too, I would say too. Probably one of the happier endings for a Gundam franchise. And I'm not saying it's great because it's a happy ending. There are some characters, as you see in the ending episode, do not get quite such a happy ending like everybody else does. But just like Gundam, there is no true true happiness for everybody. There's just accepting what you can get for the most, like getting the most out of what you have in your life, basically. And I think that's what Turn A Gundam really ends off on such a very nice note. The best you can make of it. alongside with this probably having one of the happiest endings in the entire Gundam series, I do want to say it's also strange from Tomino himself. But then again, the man tends to have like his depressive times and then his happier times. I guess when he wrote and directed Turn A Gundam, he was probably in a better place, which I'm happy to hear. I don't like to hear people are sad. Sometimes, people make some really good stuff, like Tomino making Victory Gundam and Z Gundam during his depressive points, and he made some really powerful stories and points throughout it. But Turn A Gundam, I would say, is, again, another opposite end of that same coin. He presents a much more happier ending, although bittersweet too, but the bitterness is not a whole lot there. Alongside with another change up for Tomino is the amount of deaths in this series. Most people are familiar with Tomino's work as Kill 'Em All Tomino. This series, in fact, is not a Kill 'Em All Tomino series. There are characters that do die, but I almost want to say it feels like the least amount of deaths in the entire Gundam franchise, or at least, hear me out, the least amount of deaths in a Tomino-based story in the Gundam franchise. Least amount. So that's pretty much what I want to talk about with Turn A, but there is one more thing I want to bring up here, and just to kind of clarify as well. I've already talked about a lot of the big things this series is known for, such as Tomino returning back to write and direct a Gundam series. This is the last Gundam series to be hand-painted on cell animation. And we also get some firsts with specific artists or animators in this case. But I didn't quite clearly talk about one thing here, which this series is the most known for. I probably mentioned it about a few times already, though, but the one thing that this series is really, really known for is being the series finale, or the finale to the entire Gundam franchise. Not going to be spoiling a whole lot here, but yes, the Turn A Gundam series attempts to basically state that with the Universal Century already happening, but all other series that take place in the Gundam franchise, at this current point in time, only 3 other series that were considered AU or alternate universe from the Universal Century, which was G Gundam, Gundam Wing, and Gundam X. With people being kind of confused, like, well, how does this play along with Gundam? Turn A Gundam answers the question here, and it kind of does it for past series, the present series, and even future series. So, not quite midway through, but the Turn A Gundam series talks about the dark history. Not a big surprise, but the dark history is basically talking about centuries, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe millennia, I don't even know, but thousands of years previously, we had the Universal Century, and we had all these other centuries that happened too. Turn A Gundam basically encapsulate at that current time frame of the present, encapsulating the past with the present. So all series at that time frame and that point is considered canon, and no longer, we have the UC Century over here, we have Future Century and After Colony and After War. No. Instead of everything kind of different or whatnot, Tomino wrote it in this, like saying, hey, take all those series, they happen at some point, you can mix and match wherever they took place, but they all took place in the same timeline, and everything ends with Turn A. So Turn A, and I could say this with absolute confidence, I will do a video about this too, because some fans still have the consideration or complaint or confusion whether or not Gundam Recon Gisa G, or Turn A Gundam is the last in the entire franchise. I will tell you right now, little spoilers for the future video, but yes, Turn A Gundam is the final Gundam series in the entire Gundam franchise. Regardless of, even now, we are almost 2 decades since the release of Turn A Gundam, with plenty of, I want to say an additional 15 more series that were released after Turn A Gundam, and they are still considered before it. So I can say with absolute confidence, Turn A Gundam, again, is that series finale of the entire Gundam franchise. If you were going to end off watching the entire Gundam franchise, nothing says it better than ending it off and finishing it off with Turn A Gundam. So that's what I want to say on that regard. I will make a video in the future regarding, which came first between Rico G or Turn A. Already kind of spoil it for you, but I will present proof. I did take extensive notes between Rico G and Turn A Gundam to see how it correlates and how you could argue that. All in all, the way that I've compiled it so far, not without presenting it to you at this point right now, and I'll do a video in the future. I'm not going to say when, because I'm planning to do that with a lot of other content, but Turn A Gundam is the end-all, be-all of Gundam series, of the Gundam franchise. That being said, that's what I got to say about Turn A Gundam at a series standpoint with the internals. But let me talk about other things about the series here, and I want to just jump off to my next segment, which is my favorite suits, or even talking about the worst suits of the entire series. For those of you who do not know, with every single Gundam series into the Gundam franchise brings in a whole slew of new suits, redesigns, and new battleships and the such. Turn A Gundam brings in some newer, albeit controversial suits, alongside with older and very familiar suits that we've seen in the past. I do want to talk about some little fun factors here regarding the Turn A Gundam series. So Turn A Gundam, and let me just pull it up, the Turn A here. Primarily Turn A, so how do I put this? The Turn A Gundam's design is very controversial, super different, and super alien compared to the entire Gundam franchise, especially with its mustache. That is because this series was good amount of the newer mech designs was composed by a foreigner, an American foreigner, by the way. Let me show you right here. This was done by Sid Mead. He is an American industrial designer and neo-future conception artist. He's known primarily for his best works known in Blade Runner, Aliens, and Tron. So, with that being said, you can kind of see some of the things if you've ever watched any of those three. I would hope at least one of those three. You can kind of see some of that inspiration as he drew into this. So, Sid not only just did the titular mobile suit, the Turn A, in his designs here, he actually designed a few other newer suits too in this series. Primarily, he also did the designs for the Sumo right here, the Flat, the Mobile Rib, ugly design, the Bandit, and the Turn X. So he actually did quite a bit of the designs for the newer suits. A lot of them are very strange looking, very alien looking, compared to most mobile suits that we've seen previously. I thought it was kind of funny though, because a lot of people complain about the designs of the suits. I'm going to just stick it to the rib. No. Let's just keep it on Turn A. Sorry. But yeah, they complain about oh, well, it looks such a weird suit. Why did they do that? It doesn't make any sense. And the way I look at it, though, is that, as we progress through the entire Gundam franchise, the suits got weirder and weirder. I mean, it started off with ZZ Gundam, and then we go to late century stuff, so we got, F91 to Victory Gundam. You get some really weird, almost buggy-looking kind of designs. Then we get G-Savior, and we really got, cockroach-based designs. So then when we come to Turn A, a lot of the designs kind of make sense, look nice at least comparatively. I mean, they're not terribly that bad. Fun fact too, I just want to tell you, the Sumo was actually Sid's original design for the Turn A Gundam. Tomino did not like this design, so instead Tomino decided he originally was going to scrap it, but then he thought wait a second, And he took the design instead, and they made it more of the antagonist. So he made this as Harry's suit alongside with the Royal Guard for the Diana counter. Or for Queen Diana. Or Diana. I'm not sure. Diana. They always say Diana in the series. I'll call her Diana. But okay, so obviously you could tell that this thing is the most ugliest thing in the entire world. I don't know why you call it the Jetstream. I don't know why they got updated here on MHQ. But it's known as the mobile rib. Ugly thing. I do also want to note something, and I'll point it out as we keep going. So the cockpit here is in the head. Makes sense, right? Let's get to another ugly design. The WAD. WADs, that's what they're called. Or, I like how the militia called them armadillos. I like that better. The cockpit's in the head. This is actually a relatively small suit. It's like a mobile worker-esque. It's okay by design, but it's kind of janky. It's not bad. Could be worse. Could be a Wadom. Yeah. This guy is horrific looking. Super janky, weird. Guess where the cockpit is? You guys done? Okay. The cockpit is literally in the cockpit area. I wonder if Tomio was trying to do kind of like a play on words or troll at this point or something like that. So we'll keep going here, right? So this, by the way, is a very frequent, I want to call this a mobile armor, right? They call it a mobile suit, but this thing's huge. It's like a mobile armor on its own. We get the Bandit. This thing's awful looking. Ugh, kind of makes me think like a fly. A fly turned into a mobile suit. Guess where the cockpit's at, guys? Give up already? Right here. The cockpit, the way that it opens, and the pilot's standing. This is Maribel, by the way. She's crazy. The cockpit kind of opens up like that, and the pilot's standing right there like that. What a design! What a design! Let me just close off some of these so we can get. Next one here, Miharu. Can you guess where this one is? I'll give you a hint. I mean, if you really think this is a really cool design, your head must be up your butt. trying to keep it PG, folks. But if you can't guess it from that hit, the suit is not, or the cockpit's not really in the cockpit. It's actually in the butt. Quite literally. Let me see if it shows it. Yeah, like the suit, the way that the pilot comes out, it literally crouches down, and then the seat gets ejected from its butt, and it looks like a hanging dingleberry. What is up with this series? I mean, why? By the way, I still think that this is an ugly design too, but I do want to say though, it's kind of futuristic with this look right here because it reminds me of the Lost in Space robot, like the 1950s Lost in Space robot head. Little bit of Alien too. I want to say it's Saturn 3, but it's definitely not Saturn 3 because Saturn 3 is this little weird eye fly probish head kind of look, but yeah, very weirdly designed. Not a huge fan of the Miharu. Yeah, I'm just not happy design with that. No. Wudo is actually now we're getting to suit designs that I think are kind of cool, but not cool enough. The Wudo, I don't know how they pronounce it. It's kind of weird. It's kind of cool because the mobile armor version is actually not bad. It's this weird little base thingy, but then when it transforms, we only see it in combat a couple of times, but it's a pretty interesting looking suit. I don't think it's that bad. I always want to call it Pseudo Wudo from Pokemon, but that's not the case, but it's not bad. The flat. Oh, actually, we don't. The cockpit for the Wudo, the Muto Wu, is actually in the head. So I didn't show you guys, but it's in the head. Now for the flat, let's guess. This is actually kind of a cool design because I wish we didn't have the concept art for it, but the way it transforms for its its drop mode into the Earth's atmosphere, I thought it was kind of cool looking. It looks weird, but it works. And the suit itself is it's kind of really weird, but the function behind it is really cool because it can vibrate itself, which can deflect a lot of attacks. Or if it grabs something, it can vibrate it to like literally destroy the object. It can dig into the ground with its vibration. I think it was kind of a cool suit and very very utility suit. Very defensive in combat, but it has a lot of utility behind it. Anyways, after all that talk, if you can't guess where the cockpit is, it's in the cockpit area. But the thing about this cockpit is actually kind of unique. I don't think it shows it. No, it doesn't. So the cockpit, when it opens up, it's actually very spacious because this suit is kind of like a drop ship, right? It's supposed to bring people from over. It actually has room for multiple people to be in the cockpit, and even has some additional seating in there too. I thought that was kind of cool and unique. You don't get to see that often in a lot of suits, but I appreciate it. Now, the next one is definitely not a new one, but I cannot not talk about this suit when it pops up because I love this suit. It's super cute. It's a word I like to use for a suit that looks like this. The Kapul. Or carpool, or it's enunciated different ways, but Kapul is how I like to call it. I love the Kapul. Such a nice little design, so cute in its own. It's got the froggish, but not too froggish, more like a toady. Excuse me. Froggish, but the toady. So it's got the froggish with a little bit of a toady look to it. Reminds you of aspects kind of like Gog, but doesn't look ugly like a Gog. It's kind of like a high Gog with the serrations and stuff like it in its arms. I just like this design. And fascinating enough, normally when I think of Earth suits or Earth-based suits, especially aquatic ones, I don't think of them that they would be able to function in space whatsoever. Spoilers, when we do go into space, because like in every other Gundam series, for the most part, majority of them, some of them are only on Earth, but majority of them, we go to space or we come from space, right? We do go to space in this series, and they bring in Kapuls with them. And somehow, the Kapuls function in space very well and don't have leaks. I mean, I can believe the no leaks part because it has to operate in water, so that makes sense. But how it operates and thrusts appropriately in space, it kind of baffles me. Speaking of Kapul's tool, even though they only had a model of it, they don't actually have a screenshot of it or a good image of it or whatnot. Coronator, one of my favorite characters from this series too, because he's such a weird dude, but he's weird enough to appreciate. So he does get the suit, and I just love how it's gold, and it has the little commander antenna like Char Aznavour. And it has this fist, and it has kind of like a super robot function where you can rocket punch with the fist, it'll fly, shoot right off and whatnot. I thought it was kind of funny and cool, so I just want to throw this in there. Now we're gonna get to. I mentioned some. I don't want to count the Kapuls as one of my favorites from this series because Kapuls were introduced originally in ZZ Gundam, and I've already mentioned them as my favorites, but I just had to re-talk about them because they are very prevalent in this series. Even though Kapuls show up in ZZ Gundam, we don't really see them as much, like operational-wise or function. We only see them maybe a couple of episodes. Here, they're everywhere after they start getting dug up and whatnot. So I really enjoyed it for that. No, I am not biased for this series because I get to see Kapuls in every single episode, but no, that's not the reason. I already told you why the series is good. The Turn X design, as I've already showed you, is actually not that bad looking. Very different for a Gundam. Some people argue that it's not a Gundam. I'm going to consider it a Gundam because Turn A is a Gundam. And they always considered the Turn X as the big brother to Turn A, which is a Gundam type. So I'm going to call this a Gundam type. Some people don't want to consider it. I consider it as a Gundam type. I think it's kind of cool because it does a lot of these unique features where it can split off and reminds me a lot of Psychomu system-based mobile suits or Psycho Frame-based suits where they utilize fins or bits or funnels. Or I say fins. Fin funnels or bits. Or just small funnels. So the bodies, this suit can just break apart into different segments. Also, it has the shining finger attack from G Gundam. It doesn't look like it, but it has the shining finger attack. And I was like, wait, what? It could do that? That's so cool. But yeah, I like the design overall, the functionality behind it. I would say it is maybe an evil Gundam. I mean, it kind of comes off like it does have its own personality behind it, but yeah. The Sumo. I really like the Sumo designs. These are actually pretty formidable suits, especially utilized by our Royal Guard for the Diana counter, or Diana, Queen Diana. So yeah, these are really cool suits. Its weaponry is pretty meh. It's got like a little like beam handgun that looks kind of funny. Like it fits in its hand. You can't even tell it's really a gun for the most part. And it has this neat little heat fan that can this little spike can generate like almost like a saber itself. But yeah. Oh, I apologize. So with the Kapul, for those who don't know, it's not in the cockpit area. Like not the cockpit's not in the cockpit-esque area. It's actually in the head. And Turn X. Let me go back to Turn X here. Here we go, Turn X. Turn X is actually a cockpit in the head. Who'd have thunk it? But the Sumo. Guess where the cockpit's at? If you don't know, it's not really a cockpit area, but I mean, some people kind of interpret it that way. It's right here, actually. It's more like a belly cockpit, but I mean, you kind of like most of the time it's over here, and then this series is introducing suits right here, but it's just finding right in the middle. Right in the middle. I cannot talk about a Gundam series without mentioning about the Gundam, and definitely, even though I like a lot of the designs in this series are very weird, controversial, and some of them are really not appeasing. Some are, like the Sumo, but I actually am enamored with the Turn A Gundam. I actually really like its design. Very unique, very different, fun looking, in fact. Its utility and utilization. The one thing that has always been a mystery with me is the chest compartments. We do see some of its capabilities. I feel like we never truly see what the Turn A Gundam can fully do, besides, you know, things that we see throughout the series and then at the very end. But I think it's a very unique Gundam. It's pretty cool itself. Guess where the cockpit is? Right here. So very similar to the Sumo, actually. They actually make comment about this in the series itself. Additionally, it does have a core fighter, which it ejects off and then it flips the armor flaps over. And kind of similar to the Miharu, this can actually drop down too, but it doesn't have the crouch. Doesn't look like it's taking a poo or anything like that. It just literally it'll just drop down. God, what is up with Turn A Gundam and cockpits and cockpit-esque areas? I don't know. Such a weird one for this series. But that's all I really wanted to talk about when it comes to my favorite suits or suits I did not like in this series. So let me go ahead and jump off to my next segment here. I'm new to Gundam. Should I watch Turn A Gundam first? This one was another hard one for me to give a straight answer for. But I try to hard press myself to give you guys a straight answer into what I would say would be a definitive yes or no as a first-time watcher in the Gundam franchise. That said, I'm going to say with Turn A Gundam, that's a no. And usually when I say, like, if it should be your first series or not, is because usually a series would have, like, a lot of core elements of the Gundam franchise, something that's consistent, so when you're watching throughout the entire series, it makes sense. Turn A Gundam has a lot of that. It has a lot and exhibits a lot of the key and core elements and themes of the Gundam franchise. Problem with that, though, is that it kind of requires you to have some preface knowledge of these elements to really appreciate them, like from watching it from previous series. Additionally, too, the biggest thing too is that it needs to set a good precedence while going into the Gundam franchise and setting a standard like this is what you should expect to watch from every other Gundam series. While it has all those core elements and themes, Turn A Gundam does not set a good precedence as pertained to like, hey, this is what I expect from a Gundam series. Like I mentioned before, while it has a lot of fantastic and great characters to follow with an intriguing story around politics and stuff like that, it's an incredibly slow-paced series with minimal action, I would say. And with the action too, it's not even that exciting. It does not set a really good standard of what Gundam is. It is a good Gundam series, but for your first one to watch, definitely no. I would say watch a few Gundam series before watching Turn A, like something in the UC century, just so you can actually have a bigger appreciation for Turn A. But in all honesty, I would say Turn A Gundam should be a very late watch in the Gundam franchise. Either save it for the very end, like I've already described it, or, you know, at some point, like later on, because you really need to have that culmination of watching all the other Gundam series to really appreciate Turn A Gundam, the writing for it, and the style behind it. And if you watch this first, definitely you're gonna come into the Gundam series thinking that, like, man, this is gonna be really, really boring Star Trek-esque stuff. And I'm like, no, that's not it. That's not the same. And for a franchise finale, Turn A Gundam really flips the script for all the right reasons. Throughout the entire series, it does have an incredibly slow pace and a lot of lackluster action, but Tomino masterfully utilizes that slow pacing and tension to hyper-focus on our dynamic and interesting characters to tell a highly politically driven story that encapsulates much of the core elements of the Gundam franchise. Turn A manages to not only maintain many of the franchise elements, but beautifully and powerfully ties everything together, like a moonlight butterfly slowly cascading and eclipsing you as you exit the Gundam franchise. If you have the patience, I highly recommend Turn A Gundam. That said, Turn A Gundam gets a solid 4 out of 5. I do have to say that was really, really hard to review because I keep on flubbing up. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Turn A Gundam here. Definitely a very different Gundam series overall. Not what you would expect from not only a Gundam series, but a final entry in the Gundam franchise, or if you want to consider it in that manner. A lot of it does pay off. Again, that slow pacing is kind of a drag at times, but never once throughout the... Well, only a couple of moments in the entire series where I felt like it was not relevant or paid any importance in the series. But majority of the time that we spent with our characters and the pacing that it took, everything made sense. Everything had a reason. Everything played towards something that would occur later on or played relevant for our characters and their motivations. I do feel like that last few episodes, if Tomio just had 10 more episodes to work with, and not just the 50, so 60 episodes overall, I think that those 3 episodes would have been literally smoothed out into those 10 episodes, and it would have been consistently thorough, like from beginning to end. Other than that, it seems weird that I give it a very high score too, despite that I didn't like. I mean, I do complain about pacing and the lack of action though, but it's a very, very interesting watch. If you enjoy characters, if you enjoy following the interactions amongst characters and not just, purely watching the action and stuff like that, this is definitely a Gundam series you can get behind. Fortunately and unfortunately, this is not the same thing that you would see in many of the other Gundam series. Although, much of the interesting characters and stuff like that you do see from many of the other works that Tomio has done, such as like Char's Counterattack. I'm going backwards now. Char's Counterattack, Victory Gundam, Zeta Gundam, and the original Mobile Suit Gundam. We don't speak of ZZ. Anyways, Well, that's my review for Turn A Gundam, but I just want to give you the following: that if you're watching this on Twitch, make sure to follow me on my Twitch channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a comment down below. I want to hear from you guys. What did you guys think about my review on Turn A Gundam? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Did you think that Turn A was too slow and absolute garbage? Or yeah, you agree with me that this is an actual really solid Gundam series despite its pacing and lack of action. I want to hear from you guys. Leave a comment down below. Also, if you want to keep up with what I'm doing here, you can also follow me on my Twitter account. On my Twitter account, I make announcements of when I'm going live, what I'm going to be reviewing next, and random things here and there. So I do want to thank you guys for watching, and until the next review, I will see you guys next time. Take care.